When I was in elementary school, every week we had music class. We would watch videos about music, we'd get taught notes for singing like, do, re, mi, fa, so, I forget the rest. And for most of each year, we were taught how to play the recorder. Now, the recorder is kind of like a flute, but it sucks. All we ever did was play Hot Cross Buns and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It sounded awful even if you played it right, and I remember thinking it was super obnoxious. I'm sure the recorder is a fine instrument in the right hands, but dude, not us 8-year-olds with these $5 plastic toys. It was from this experience that I decided. I hate music. It's dumb. No way I'll ever care about it in the future. And see, this is the part of the story where irony comes into play, because nowadays I think that music is one of the most important parts of any piece of media, and I love it so much. Not as much as I love my patrons, but it's close. In my opinion, nothing comes closer to conveying the raw emotions a creator is trying to express to their audience than music. There are dozens of examples I could go over from all different kinds of media, but how about I press the easy button today and settle for a sequel? I already talked about how Kyoto Animation shows are a feast for your eyes, so now I'm gonna talk about how they make love to your ears. I'll be foregoing the timeline this time since there isn't much progression from show to show. Each OST is tailor-made for their respective series, nothing more. So in its place, I'll be giving each soundtrack a rating out of 10. There were a lot of surprises, a handful of upsets, and so many more reasons to appreciate KyoAni's work than I ever had before. Starting things off, I cut out a lot of the producer era from the last video because I wanted to focus on shows KyoAni made by themselves. But I'm making one exception for this show because I like it. So picture this. You fall asleep watching Cartoon Network because you're one of those lucky little shits whose parents let you keep a TV in your room growing up. Around 3 a.m., you wake up to play on your Game Boy Advance because that's life when you're 9. And then you glance up at the TV and hear this. I want to change the world. Jonatsu Kayasazu ni takanaru mirai. Gotta talk over this so that I don't get demonetized. That would really suck. Ugh. Maybe I shouldn't be recording while I'm sick. You guys drop me a gambare in the comments so I can feel better. Inuyasha is one of those shows that reminds me of all the media I consumed when I was a kid, and I absolutely love it for it. It has everything. Monster of the Week structure, the plot centers around collecting shards of some special object, the running gag that makes 0 sense out of context. Sit, boy! The evil guy who's evil but not really, also they're related to the protagonist, the wacky cast of companions, the romance that's gonna take 200 episodes to go anywhere, the comedic and slice of life elements that just have to be there for some reason, and most importantly, the cool fantasy world that would always make you jealous that you didn't stumble upon it yourself, even though it's really dangerous and you'd probably die. I know for a fact I'm not alone on that one. Man, I wish I could travel to the feudal era. Me too. Probably not a good idea. Come on, man, let him dream. You may not be able to go, but Inuyasha's soundtrack will definitely try to take you there. The orchestral score immediately sweeps you off your feet and surrounds you with the imposing grandeur of feudal Japan. I should start waking up to A Day in the Village every day now, because my god is it soothing. Inuyasha's theme sounds like it's straight out of Monster Hunter, and that is a very good thing. The track Evil Spirits has this sinister Shin Megami Tensei-ass breakdown that sounds as evil as it is cool. Kikyo's theme perfectly complements her tragic character. The song takes on a similar form to others in the soundtrack, but the lead instrument is this scratchy, kind of messed up sounding string instrument that conveys this idea of beauty drenched in underlying sadness. The vocal tracks are something else entirely. Destiny and Love is a good standout. Just close your eyes and give it a listen. Obviously, copyright means I can't play much at all for you, but you heard something you liked, right? Finally, the woodwind instrument from Kagome's track. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but there are like 150 songs in this soundtrack, and I love most of them. But this song, it is so heartwarming and emotional, and so indicative of the compassion that this character offers to this age that sorely lacks it. Do Did they play this stuff live? I'd love to see that. Anyways, 10 out of 10. This score belongs on some brilliant classical film, not a Monster of the Week anime for teenagers. Also, the composer of this OST also did the music for Ghost Stories. That actually kind of tracks, and I think that's really funny. Alright, Munto. Let's see. If I had to break it down, I'd say that Munto's soundtrack can best be characterized as being really hard to find. But what I got was the 2-disc special soundtrack that has 60 songs on it. I don't know which Munto this belongs to, so I'm just gonna say this is all of them. On top of the disappointment some of you may be feeling right now, I'd like to add the fact that I really don't know how to talk about Munto's music, because I can't glean an ounce of personality out of it. It feels like generic anime music. Battle themes, creepy themes, oh god, it's morning and I'm late for school themes. They're perfectly serviceable, but they just feel derivative. This feeling of stagnation and familiarity is one that some of the soundtracks in KyoAni's library suffer from, but to get that same feeling here, in 2005, it'll be like 7 or 8 years until we get another one of its kind, which is just odd. 4 out of 10. A bit of a letdown and a surprise to say the least. By the way, take all these opinions with a grain of salt. I'm no musician. I'm the guy who consumes music through cringe-ass Five Nights at Freddy's memes.
Yo, check this out. I think this is my favorite song now.
Yo, what? Oh no, it's the purple guy.
Full Metal Panic Fumoffu's opening is rad as hell. It perfectly sets the tone for this more lighthearted second season. As for the rest of the OST, I didn't recall any of these songs when I went back and listened to them again. Rewatching some of my favorite episodes from the show showed me why. Half the time there isn't even music in the background, and when there is, the music serves to slightly enhance the mood for each scene. It's just kinda unimpressive. But in my opinion, the show itself is more than carried by, you know, being funny. 9 out of 10 show, but in fairness, I gotta give the soundtrack a 5. Air gives us the introduction of Jun Maeda, Shinji Orito, and Magome Tagoshi, who, for the most part, would work on the music for all 3 shows in Kyoto Animation's key adaptation trilogy. Starting things off, Tori no Uta is iconic, and for good reason. Like Inuyasha's OST, it has this hypnotizing air of grandeur and importance that just whisks you away to another reality. Many pieces sound rather similar, but I really don't care because they're all so relaxing. The imagery I get is some guy sitting out on the porch on a summer day just taking everything in, which you can guess is probably the vibe they were going for. There are some duds here though. I find that key soundtracks always tend to have 2 or 3 songs that are just ear-piercing for no reason, and Tento Mushi definitely fits that description in my eyes. Natsukage and Anishi are my 2 favorite tracks, and honestly they're the only 2 that I remembered vividly from the show, but that could be because I wasn't a big fan of Air when I first watched it. Finishing things off, Alzara is a beautiful song, and proves just how damn good of a singer Leah is, even more so than the opening. Please give this track a listen even if you've never heard of Air before. I'll give this OST a 7 out of 10, very good but not exceptional. Toshihiko Sahashi returns from Fumoffu to do the OST for Full Metal Panic the second raid, and I gotta say, this more serious style of music seems to fit him better. I think it's at its best when it's doing battle themes. The first tracks hit you with this technological and metallic feeling combined with J-pop. It's very mid-2000s, and it's sick. The trumpets also carry a lot of the later songs. It feels like they tried to go for a Code Geass-esque sense of royal importance and scale, but that's just it. It feels like a watered-down version of its contemporaries. I think if it stuck to the unique style of the first few tracks rather than delving into the sweeping orchestral style of music, I would have liked it a lot more. Kakuto is by far my favorite track. That piano melody is so fun to follow along with. Hard recommendation there. Also, the ED is nice and relaxing. 6 out of 10. It's got some bangers, but it's bogged down by a lot of the track list just being okay. What's next? Oh, Haruhi. So there's no easy way to say this, but 11 out of 10. This 149 track beast of an OST nails every emotion, enhances every scene, and it constantly impresses me to this day. I am sick and tired of people looking at me like I'm crazy when I say this is one of the greatest soundtracks for any piece of media, and I could very well make a separate video talking about why 90% of the songs in this OST are gold. You'll notice from the last few entries that I didn't talk much about how the music makes the actual scenes they appear in better, and that's because aside from Air, I don't think most of them really did, hence the good handful of ratings that some of you may have found to be a bit harsh. That is not the case with Haruhi, so to reel myself back from talking about its music for 2 hours, I'm going to focus exclusively on a few examples that show how these songs make an already fantastic show that much more special. I feel like people were so relieved to be through with Endless 8 that they never stopped to examine just how perfect the music here is. As Kyone's thoughts fly through his head, searching desperately for an answer he's failed to grasp for what feels like hundreds of years, a piano piece builds up this struggle by gradually getting louder and more aggressive, repeating the same melody in different ways, almost as if the song is pushing back against an impenetrable force, trying to break free. Each boomy note resounding in your ears as the solution draws ever closer, and when Kyone's time is up and he definitively needs to reveal his answer, they hang on the shot and the song lets loose. Then silence takes over, and only the sound of sparks flying from Kyone's hand can be heard as he finds exactly what he was looking for. I can still hear Koizumi's obnoxious kiss-ass speech about Haruhi the next day every time I listen to the track that accompanies it. The strings complement the piano as Kyone takes over, reassuring himself that those endless summers weren't for nothing. Then we dynamically shift to a more friendly, reassuring tone as the two guys agree to play poker together. The best part by far is how the ending of the song is perfectly in time, with Kyone dejectedly dropping his straight flush on the table. If you watched my Endless 8 video, you might have noticed that I tried to end it off in the exact same way. Even for my stupid YouTube video, this song still tied everything up in a pristine little bow, at least in my opinion. God Knows and Lost by Music are of course phenomenal, but I've talked about them too much, so how about we focus on the ending scene of that episode. The wind picks up as Haruhi admits that standing up on that stage made her feel like she was really doing something, and this happy, innocent, and subdued piece begins to play. It takes on a more playful tone when Haruhi snaps at Kyone and takes a bite out of some grass because she's hungry, and then she gets an idea for how to recover from this. She lunges forward and is all let's form a band, rebounding with her high energy, and to show this, the acoustic guitar starts going nuts. Finally, once she's done rattling off everything they're gonna do next year, the song begins winding down as she grabs Kyone's hand instead of his tie like usual. Then you get that da 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 da. It's just like, man, very few other shows make me think about the music I'm listening to and how it enhances what I'm watching more than Haruhi. That's why I like it so much. With Kanon, we have a bit of a change in composers. Maeda and Orito are still here, but now there's this third guy who's only ever worked on this show filling in for Tagoshi. Not sure why, but regardless, this is a phenomenal soundtrack. It uses a lot of those really bright, almost heavenly piano sounds. I'm not sure if that's just an effect or a different instrument that I'm too stupid to recognize. Either way, they complement the winter setting perfectly. This song, which I felt the need to tell myself in the notes for this video, don't try to pronounce this shit, lol, has the appeal of a warm and inviting house or a town in a 90s JRPG. The woodwind instrument killed it here, and it's a similar deal with the more upbeat Yuki no Shoujo. As for enhancing the mood, whenever they use that music box track, I genuinely felt affected, so it gets points for that, even if it's not nearly as hard-hitting as other soundtracks we'll be getting to. Favorite song is, by far, Pure Snows, and that's mostly because of an inside joke I have with my brother about it. See, there's a part in this track where the pianist goes so unnecessarily hard, and it always cracked up my brother and I while we were watching. I specifically remember Yuichi and Ayu were having some serious conversation on the balcony of the house, and we were both just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You hear that guy going nuts too, right? Anyways, it's short, sweet, sweet and fun, like that snowman you made when you were 8 whose death traumatized you severely. Good times. Speaking of 8, this gets an 8 out of 10. Satoru Kosaki returns to give us the soundtrack for Lucky Star, scoring this heaping helping of nothing with some of the most addicting earworms I've ever contracted. So many of these tracks are just simple melodies, but just like Haruhi, the way they complement the nature of the show makes them irresistible. Lots of leitmotifs, if you can even call them that. It's more like they remake the same song with different instruments to fit a different situation. And yet, among this sea of goofy and simple, there are some tracks that genuinely surprised me. Haragi 4 Shimai belongs in Hyouka, and spoiler alert, that's a 10 out of 10, so take it as a compliment. The Initial D parody song Gravity is freaking phenomenal. They committed to the bits so heavily that they made a banger song to go along with it, and the way the drift around the curves syncs up perfectly with the drop in the song, it's so perfect. The opening is iconic. I don't know if popular opinion has shifted over the years from thinking the song is annoying to genuinely loving it, but I like it, and that's clearly all that matters. Also, it seems like every kyoani show has an obligatory emotional song or two that's thrown into their OSTs, but Heiwa Dana might just be one of my favorites. It's just an acoustic guitar and a piano going to work, but there's this bizarre combination of sadness and comfort that comes from the melody they create. It's quite strange, but I like it that way. Another solid 8 out of 10. Alright, so before I give Clannad the 11 out of 10 it's obviously going to get from me, I want to say that I love how Clannad's music completes the theming of the trilogy. Air and Kanon were polar opposites, taking place in summer and winter respectively, and then Clannad is all-encompassing. Very cool. Anyways, like with Haruhi, I'm going to avoid bogging down the video with endless examples by focusing on one specific aspect of the OST. See, kyoani wasn't content with just using tracks from the visual novel. No, they brought in several songs from the mini remix albums Clannad had received prior, like Memento, Mabinogi, Sororado, and Sororado Append. These beautiful reinventions of beloved songs do so much for the anime, and even though I still prefer the visual novel, these additions alone make me think twice about my decision. Here are some examples. Komorebi takes the title screen theme from the visual novel and gives it lyrics, elevating it into this perfectly symbolic track about how the pain of living is always worth it to experience the happy times life has to give you. I love how blunt the lyrics are about the fact that pain is everywhere. The first 2 lines literally saying, "Why am I overflowing with tears? It's because I've lived too long." Like, fuck me, dude. The version of Dango Daikazoku created for this show is so sweet, charming, and later devastating when they play it for you again near the end of the show. I love it when the same song can have so many different meanings depending on when you hear it in a story. There's all the goofy remixes that are super fun to listen to, especially that one with the accordion that made my brother and I laugh out loud when we first heard it. Tokiwo Kizamu Uta took the track To the Same Heights from the visual novel and turned it into the OP for After Story. The pacing of it, the nostalgic, emotional ride it takes you on, setting you up perfectly for this story about accepting growth and change, both good and bad. And the way it breaks down to a whisper at the end as you're hit with these powerful piano stings, one of the greatest openings of all time. And finally, the warm piano version of Nagasa from the Memento album is my favorite piano piece ever, period. I won't do it the disservice of trying to describe it to you. Please, listen to it for yourself. Trust me, this shouldn't come as a shock, but this is my favorite soundtrack of the bunch. Clannad is a deeply important story to me, and a huge reason why it became that way is because the music managed to stir my emotions more than any other. It's powerful, it's weird, it's funny, it's moving, and it's exceedingly special. Just like Clannad, it's the full package. 11? No. 12 out of 10. K-on's soundtrack has a very strong moe vibe, and a really cool homemade feel to it. A lot of the tracks utilize unorthodox instruments and weird noises that make it sound like the characters in the show composed the BGM themselves. Like if you asked me to identify a single instrument from the song Pinch Daisuke, I couldn't. The tracks complement the show itself very well. There are 1 or 2 standout moments like in Season 2, Episode 20, where the emotions of the scene peak right as it becomes noticeable that the background track is a remix of You and I, and K-on has something else up its sleeve, its slew of live performances. As much as I love to say that I'm not really a fan of Hokago Tea Time's music, I still find myself humming along and tapping my feet to the songs when they play in the show. I also still remembered how all of them go despite it being like, what, 3 years since I last saw this show. Looks like I lost this round. Best song from the OST is Happy End. I thought about giving this show a 7, but that felt way too harsh. Take your 8 out of 10 and get out of my brain. Okay, Disappearance. Man, I already talked about this film's music so much, it's hard to find more to say. It's perfect. It makes me cry just listening to it. Please watch this movie if you haven't, and keep your ears open. 11 out of 10. Satoru Kosaki might just be my favorite KyoAni composer. Nichijou has a lot of simplistic yet avant-garde tracks. Their wackiness complements the absurd slice-of-life hybrid that is this show pretty well. Also, I forgot how many songs I liked from this OST. I went through assuming I'd find like 6 or 7, but almost every song I would go, I remember this one rocks. The openings and endings are all great. I really like how the second half of the show has a different ED for every episode, and for a favorite track, I gotta roll with Nichijou no Toko. 8 out of 10, I'm sensing a running theme here. The Kanon movie is still Kanon but British. 2 out of 10. Nah, seriously, it's more Kanon and Kanon is good. The best part of the entire film is when they land in London and a rendition of Have Some Tea with Bagpipes starts to play. 7.5? Yeah, that's good. Cut down on the 8s a little bit. Hyouka's soundtrack was composed by Kohei Tanaka, a guy whose name I'm shocked I've never heard of before, because apparently he was responsible for the first openings of Dragon Ball and One Piece. I'm sorry? I looked into his history because I love Hyouka and wanted to learn more about it. Never expected to find this. This is like going to your favorite restaurant for years and one day the head chef walks out to your table and says, "Pleasure to meet you, I'm fucking Gordon Ramsay." This is like going to your son's flag football practice and then the coach walks up to you and says, "Pleasure to meet you, I'm fucking Tom Brady." This is like... I think I secretly have a thing for soundtracks that incorporate classical music. The rustic and refined aesthetic of Hyouka is only enhanced by inclusions like Air Suite No. 3, Moonlight Sonata, and Cello Suite No. 1. The openings and the endings are some of the best out there, and the sheer creativity of the animation built around the second OP and ED blow me away to this day. This is another one of those shows where I'm sitting down watching and every 5 minutes I go, hell yeah, I love this song. 2 favorite tracks stand out though. Freshness of the Sky is an obvious one. It was the perfect song to end the show on, and I can always see the cherry blossom petals flying through the sky as it picked up at 1 minute and 20 seconds in. Again, just like the Endless 8 video, it was a pleasure to end my first Hyouka video with it. The Serenity of the Mind sounds like one of those songs that you hear when you like die watching the sunrise. Wait, no, that doesn't make any. The Serenity of the Mind is very peaceful and somber. I especially love how it was used at the end of Mayaka's arc in the school festival. Also, props to that Oriki Figured It Out song for sounding like a badass gunslinger duel. 10 out of 10. The composer for Chuunibyou has the best profile picture out of any industry worker on any list. Anyways, my experience with this OST is monopolized by one song, Rakai to Aijo to Yasashi Manazashi. You might remember it as the emotional piano music that they played a bunch in the show, and in my eyes, it's just the perfect adolescent love song. The bittersweet, exciting, warm feelings it conveys are superb, and they match the show to a T. The rest of the music has Munto syndrome though. It just sounds like generic BGM that blends in with other shows, especially other KyoAni shows. But while stuff like Lucky Star and Kanon carved out their own unique identities, I don't see much tethering this OST to Chuunibyou other than the occasional battle theme because this show actually has those. It's still good, but I would have liked to see more personality, especially for a show about overactive imaginations. 6 out of 10. Tamako Market is getting 1 additional point added to its total score exclusively for Koi no Uta. Great song, great motif, and I'm a sucker for grumpy old characters showing off their softer side. Let it be known that giving a dad a background in music will always be a sick character trait. As for the rest of it, well, the ED is good. The other tracks are simple and cutesy, kinda like Kanon, and they even have some of that homemade charm to them. But like, worse? There's some good stuff like Midori's theme and Happy Tamako, but most of it just ain't it. 4+1 out of 10. Free might be the first example we've seen of the soundtrack being better than the show itself. I was expecting generic, mediocre stuff, but no, not at all. It has a modern feel to it, lots of electronic sounds, and the mixing is very, you know. Just listen to the dip at the beginning of Taste the Satisfaction. Great song name, by the way. The tracks that sound straight out of Shadow the Hedgehog still make me laugh, and I unironically love them. Great nostalgia is, get this, great. And of course, Words That Changed My Life is a, by this point a little cliche, but still wonderful emotional centerpiece for the show. 7 out of 10, color me impressed. For Kyokai no Kanata, the first thing I gotta mention is Daisy is in my top 5 EDs of all time, no question. I'm giving this show 2 free points for it alone because I'm very stupid. Also, quick PSA, every ED should strive to fade in as each episode is ending. It's so good. Anyways, the rest of the OST is serviceable. It's kinda like Chuunibyou where it sometimes leans into its wacky magical personality, but most of the time it's just generic anime music. Any song where they use the choir does a great job showing off this show's good side, but even the intense action music feels interchangeable with other shows quite often. 4 plus 2 out of 10. Tamako Love Story is, as expected, much more down on itself and reserved than Tamako Market's music was. I always appreciate the lengths this movie goes to distance itself from the show in a sense, as if to reassure the audience that they've got a plot with consequences now. The song that plays in the record shop that, again, I was advised to not even try to pronounce, sets the stage perfectly. It's like one of those songs that a cartoon character listens to while lying face up on their bed after getting dumped. A little I'm 14 and this is deep energy, but in a good way, because it perfectly complements the emotions the characters on screen are feeling. Everything about this movie screams first love, and it's great. Kaze no Fukusaki is the standout track for sure. The way it builds up as Tamako sprints towards the train station, adding layer after layer as she gets ever closer, great job on that one. So, Amagi Brilliant Park's OST always reminded me of a Wario Land game of all things. Goofy, stylish, and damn fun to listen to. I grew up playing Wario Land 4 and Wario Land Shake It, and to me, these two sound like long-lost relatives. Give it a listen and tell me it doesn't fit perfectly in a charming 2D platformer. Oh, and the show itself. It works great for the off-the-wall, sometimes off-color comedy of this show. Tons of variety, tons of style, tons of fun. Favorite track is definitely Zimbu 30 Yens, which is good because they play it all the time. 8 out of 10. The Kyokai no Kanata movie is really somber and has a lot of crying, so you can imagine what kind of tracks play here. It's either super intense or super intent on making you tear up. Effective, but nothing too spectacular. 6 out of 10. I do really like the credits theme though. Our favorite Chuunibyou composer returned to score Hibike Euphonium, and this is by far the better of the two. Putting aside all the big band performances, which are great, the standard OST is still phenomenal. There are a handful of Chuunibyou-esque interchangeable anime tracks, but they're trounced by like the 20 instant classics you'll find here. Right from the start, Hajimari no Senritsu conveys the earnestness and beauty of the band's collective aspirations for greatness, and it sets up a wonderful leitmotif which is carried throughout the series. Ichiho Zutsumai is so calm and powerful. Ishiki no Hoga is easily one of the best songs from any kyoani show. Ichizuna Hitomi is so energizing. And of course, the piece Hibike Euphonium is fantastic despite it only being one instrument that I'm pretty sure you aren't even supposed to play by itself. Also, it's another great leitmotif. I had the biggest smile on my face when they used the song for the season 3 teaser. Chikai is in a similar boat. I may not have liked the movie, but it didn't slack on the music or anything. 8 out of 10. Now, Phantom World I have almost entirely blocked out of my memory, so listening to the soundtrack again was like hearing these songs for the first time. And I gotta say, I'm impressed. I really expected to hate this, but this OST is a 55-track beast full of banger after banger. Fight songs are electric and exciting. Slice of life throwaway tracks are surprisingly creative and engaging. Mysterious tracks are intriguing and actually do a good job building tension. I could do without the beep boop songs, the ones that just sound like they're made to be obnoxious, you know the kind. But overall, good stuff. I don't see eye to eye with this show, at all, but I'll give it props here. 7 out of 10, fuck you. Kinsuke Ushio is a composer with a short but very impressive resume to his name, as he's composed for shows like Devilman Crybaby, Ping Pong the Animation, and 2 of the best films kyoani has ever made. Everything about A Silent Voice's music is so subdued and natural. These realistic sounds accompanied by white noise put you right into the shoes of the characters, as the piano flourishes help you get lost in their stories. Lit parentheses ver, don't know how that's supposed to be said, is obviously the standout, and one of the few times the movie is allowed to be bombastic and loud, as if it had been savoring that moment until the very end. It's exceptional. Also, I know this song wasn't composed by Ushio or anything, but I really like the use of My Generation for the opening of the film. It's such a contrast from the rest of the movie's music, which expertly places Kid Shoya on the pedestal he's about to get drop-kicked off of in the beginning of the story. 9 out of 10. Dragon Maid's music is very over-the-top and intentionally obnoxious. I understand that it works well for it, even if it isn't really my style. That doesn't stop me from bobbing my head up and down to a lot of the tracks though, especially the one that always plays when they're talking about the next episode. And Sayonara, like I said in my Dragon Maid video, is the GOAT. I adore this song. 7 out of 10, and Season 2 gets the same deal. Its new tracks have their own more intense style, but it fits the same mold and brings the same chaotic and exciting energy to the table. Chuunibyou Take on Me sounds like Chuunibyou. I should have just covered this while talking about the show. Whoops. What did I give it before? A 6? Yeah, that sounds about right. Violet Evergarden's OST, just like the show, has a certain vibe to it. One that screams this is super well produced and also genetically engineered to make you feel things. And while it did work on me, I do kinda miss the simple feel of the older stuff like the Key trilogy. And yes, that does mean that a lot of these tracks end up sounding the same, but they match the time period and the tone of the show. This is mostly thanks to all the woodwind and string instruments. The Voice in My Heart being a good example of them being put to work. Another Sunny Day is super uplifting. Those Words You Spoke to Me remind me of the little jingles that play when you finish a quest in Monster Hunter. Again, that's a good thing. And The Love That Binds Us is the iconic track from the show. Yeah, it's good. Not much else to say though. I feel like I'll always really like Violet Evergarden, but there's a certain level of soul to it that I think is missing for it to truly become one of my favorites. It just feels a tad too artificial compared to KyoAni's other emotional roller coasters. This soundtrack is no different. 7 out of 10. Kensuke Ushio is back at it again with white noise, random sounds, and lots of subdued melodies. Sound familiar? It's the same idea as in A Silent Voice, and it works just as well in Liz and the Bluebird. Something this movie has to itself though are the performance pieces. The titular Liz and the Bluebird track highlights the oboe and the flute perfectly, and the way it's performed in the film tells you this crystal clear story of inadequacy and hesitation without any words. This is especially true for the oboe solo. Chills every time. That cymbal clash a few minutes in is way too loud though. Also, more importantly, there are like 6 different versions of Ririka's theme in this soundtrack. Hell yeah. 9 out of 10. Tsurune has hardcore Munto syndrome, and so recently in KyoAni's timeline too. This kind of music just isn't special anymore. Kokosei no Nichijou is a pretty cool song. The trumpet is great, but yeah. I don't know if I'm projecting how I feel about the show onto this OST, but the only word that pops into my head is serviceable. I guess if I gave Phantom World a fair chance, then this one was no different. 5 out of 10. Violet Evergarden the movie has a very similar OST to the show, but I'm bumping its score up to an 8 out of 10 exclusively for the new version of Michi Shirube. Violet is one of the few shows where I never skipped the ED. The quiet singing, the gorgeous instrumentals. It always felt good to sit back and reflect on the episode I just watched while my ears were being tickled by angels. The movie said, oh, you like that song? Well, how about we make it twice as good somehow and use it as the emotional climax of the movie? Go ahead. Start crying, pussy. The grandeur, the emotion, the clear passion that went behind it. This is what I wanted more of from Violet. This feeling of authenticity. This celebration of the series that is so unapologetically itself. It feels like it has its own voice here, is I guess what I mean. I don't care if this movie was one big retcon. I don't care if it's contrived. This film and this song made me feel something, and that's more than most can say. I don't believe the soundtrack for Season 2 of Tsurune has even been released yet, but after watching a few episodes, it's Tsurune. 5 out of 10. Put some personality into it next time. It's a bit of a downer to end the video on, huh? Man, I hate it when YouTubers do that. Why leave people with a bad taste in their mouths, yeah? Just seems like intentionally mean-spirited. Anyways, special thanks to Silent Secondary, Mr. Chocolate Salmon, and Volume Warning.
Make it totter!
And the rest of my wonderful patrons.